Hello and welcome to Pock and Rob. In this video I am going to rank the 15 studio albums of R.E.M. This is a video I've been planning to do for some while. It's been delayed quite a bit because I've listened to a lot of R.E.M. recently to make sure that my ranking really reflects how I feel about it, and I am now finally settled. Before I go in and rank the albums, I would remind you to subscribe if you haven't already done so, to click the thumbs up to like the video, the bell to receive notifications of future content, and share the video. In terms of subscriptions, we are 5 short of my next target, which is 250, when I will be doing another live stream. Just 5. So if you share this video and someone else subscribes, then a live stream is coming. I am well prepped for either the 70s or the 90s, and I might give it to you to actually pick. R.E.M. emerged in the 80s as a 4-piece band from Athens in Georgia, USA. It consisted of Bill Berry, Peter Buck, Mike Mills and Michael Stipe, and they were a massive college band that then became, in the 90s, the biggest band in the world. It was an odd trajectory. And then around about 95, 96, Bill Berry decided to retire and they became a 3-piece. So let's dive in and rank the 15 albums. And at number 15, the first album of the 3-piece, which is Up. The majority of this album is, for me, almost unlistenable. I really dislike it. One of the most admired songs on here by others is At My Most Beautiful, which has got some gorgeous accompaniment and then a complete, for me, absence of melody in Michael Stipe's vocal line. Track 11 is Day Sleeper. Day Sleeper, I think, is absolutely fantastic. It's the best thing on here and actually one of R.E.M's very best ever songs. Up is there's a track after Day Sleeper called Diminished. For me, they were diminished as a band when they released Up. It's poor. It's my number 15, comfortably my number 15. And number 14, their final album, again, they're still a 3-piece, Collapse Into Now. The problem for me with Collapse Into Now is it's just wallpaper. It's boring. There's very little on here that stands out. I cannot hum a single track off Collapse Into Now. I quite like Mine Smell Like Honey when I hear it. I quite like Walk It Back, Me, Marlon Brando and I. The final track, Blue, however, irritates me. I'll come to why a little bit later. But the whole album is just... It feels like R.E.M. doing paint by numbers, and nothing imaginative or innovative in this record that makes me want to listen to it again when it's just finished. A great R.E.M. album, when it's finished, I want to think, I could listen to that again. Collapse Into Now does not achieve that, and they disbanded afterwards, and arguably, rightly so. It's my number 14. Number 13... Big R.E.M. fans may have already turned off my ranking because they found that this, Around the Sun, is not number 15. It's only number 13. I find more to enjoy on Around the Sun than I did on Collapse Into Now or Up. Peter Buck described this record as what it is. It's a sound of a band that are fed up with the material that they're recording, that they'd overworked the material in here, and they don't think there's anything wrong with the songs, and I would agree with that. The songs on here are actually pretty decent. Leaving New York, the opening track and lead-off single, it is great. I really like Aftermath. Make It All Okay, which I kind of know as the Didn't You Now song, I think's really, really strong. Electron Blues, decent. I quite like The Worst Joke Ever, and I've seen that described as their worst ever song, and I don't agree. When this album came out, I was stoked for it because I'd liked the previous one a lot, and I happened to be in Canada at the time, and I was excited to hear what Around the Sun was going to be like, and I admit, it was a disappointment, it was a letdown. But I think it's worth revisiting, and it isn't good. Don't get me wrong, it isn't good, and it does sound tired, and they do sound fed up. But Around the Sun, the songs on here are pretty good. It's my number 13. At number 12, I have placed what I think is their weakest album of their independent years run, the first 5 albums. Fables of the Reconstruction. The album was recorded in London by with producer Joe Boyd, which was apparently a bit of an ambition for them, but they weren't happy as a band. They weren't happy in London. They weren't. Bill Berry particularly hated the food, and their negativity kind of led to a fairly swampy album that contains, for me, very few highlights. That's not to say it doesn't contain highlights, because it contains Driver 8. Driver 8's an absolutely banging song. I've always liked it. My introduction to some things like Driver 8 and Can't Get There From Here and Green Grow the Rushes was through the Best of R.E.M. compilation that was released just as they were going supernova big. With the exception perhaps of Maps and Legends, there's not a huge amount on this album that really stands out for me. And it's my number 12. At number 11, and this album could probably swap places with what I've placed at 10 and 9. They're all of a similar parity, but there's a reason why it's that little bit lower. It is the final album from them as a four-piece, New Adventures in Hi-Fi. Often this is cited as their last truly great album. If you're following closely, you'll know that I do not agree with that statement. There are great songs on New Adventures in Hi-Fi. Electrolyte is gorgeous. How the West Was Won and Where It Got Us is terrific. New Test Leper is great. Zither, I think, is my favourite R.E.M. instrumental. And then there's Leave. Now, Leave is a song I both love and detest. The reason I detest it is that siren that constantly goes off in the background of the song. Deliberately so. It's a deliberate choice. But it's a migraine in a box. But the song itself will not leave me. Literally, will not leave. Because it's a great song underneath. And why have I placed it at number 11? Given how many good songs are on here, like Undertow and Wake Up Bomb. And the simple answer is, I freaking hate Ebo the Letter. I don't like the sound of it. It was the lead-off single, brave choice, but and Patti Smith, I cannot abide her vocals. And then she appears again on Blue at the end of Collapse Into Now. Remember I said I'd come back to Collapse Into Now and my mention about Blue? Patti Smith's return. I so loathe Ebo the Letter that as a result it tumbles out of the top 10. It's also way too long. New Adventures in Hi-Fi, I will do a reimagined about this because I think if you condensed what I think are the best tracks down, you've got a top 5 R.E.M. album lurking in New Adventures in Hi-Fi. It's my number 11. And number 10 is an album that I have seen given huge amounts of plaudits. It is their 5th album and their last with IRS, Document. So, Document contained 3 singles, all of which are stellar. So, It's the End of the World as We Know It, and I Feel Fine, is almost the definitive R.E.M. song. The One I Love, incredibly simple, but at the same time, incredibly vapid. And Finest Work Song. It's got Exhuming McCarthy, which I absolutely think is fantastic. Disturbance at the Heron House. But I do think the album falls off the cliff on the equivalent of what is side 2. Now, I've never heard Document on vinyl. I'd like to. In fact, that's an issue with most of my listening to R.E.M. is that they were not a band that I, until very recently, heard anything by them on vinyl. And vinyl changes the way your relationship with music. A vinyl copy of Document might see me finding side 2 a whole different experience. What's good on Document is phenomenal. What's not good on Document is a bit dull. And that's why it's at number 10. And at number 9 is a perfect example of vinyl changing your relationship with an album. I recently acquired these. It is Monster. I will admit that when Monster came out in 94, I became a R.E.M. fan around about 1990. I'm one of those ones that they would be described as a fair weather fan because of Out of Time and Automatic for the People. But when Monster came out, I hated it. I was at university, I'd been there a couple of years, I bought it when it came out, I hated it. I didn't know what they were trying to do, and I did know their back catalogue. I had the best of R.E.M. I had started to purchase their previous albums in what's the IRS Years collection, like Document with bonus tracks. So I was familiar with their work prior to Out of Time. Listening again to Monster, I've discovered what a great album it actually is. And the opening track, What's the Frequency, Kenneth, was always good. But now I am appreciative of Star 69 and Crush with Eyeliner and King of Comedy and Bang and Blame, and especially You, right at the end of the album, which feels like a claustrophobic song struggling to break out. And it's intended, it's an emotive yelp of a song. And Monster, it's way better than I ever thought it was. Maybe my tastes have changed and matured. I certainly don't hate it. I actually really like Monster, and whenever it goes on, I'm having a far better time than I did back in '94. Monster, my number 9. And number 8, I have placed Out of Time, the album that caused R.E.M. to blow up. I had this on a t-shirt. In fact, my t-shirt had a mirror version of this on the back, so it looked like it went through. It was a brilliant t-shirt. Out of Time had Shiny Happy People, which was a huge hit in the UK. And it has Losing My Religion, which was what really caused them to become the biggest band on the planet. But as an album, it's one heck of a mixed bag. There are tracks on here that I think are genuinely amongst their very best stuff. Near Wild Heaven is wonderful. Side 2 comfortably outstrips Side 1. Shiny Happy People, I don't care what anyone else says, it's a great pop song. I like Belong. I love Half a World Away. Texarkana, sung by Mike Mills, like Near Wild Heaven, and I think they're both fantastic as a result. Me and Honey at the end of the record. Country Feedback is a step down for me. I've seen people cite that as R.E.M's best ever song. I completely disagree. But it's such a mixed bag. Side B, it's a weird thing. If you put Country Feedback on side A and put Near Wild Heaven on side B would be perfect, and side A would be, for me, almost unlistenable. I mean, Radio Song is just terrible. Out of Time, their blow-up album, I have placed at number 8. At number 7, I remember this being marketed as The Love Affair with Other Bands is Over. Return to R.E.M, its Reveal. Released in 2001. I really, really enjoy Reveal. Imitation of Life was the lead-off single, and I think is classic R.E.M pop, and it nearly didn't make the album because it is so unlike everything else on it. So you could argue there was a little bit of mis-selling, but everything else on it, this is a summer album, and there's no question about it. I mean, look at the front cover and look at the back cover. It is deliberately a summer album. It's reflected in tracks like Beach Ball and Summer Turns to High. The album opens with The Lifting, which is a prequel to Day Sleeper. This was the follow-up to Up, hence why the marketing campaign of The Love Affair with Other Bands is Over. All the Way to Reno's fantastic. I'll Take the Rain. I love Saturn Return. I love Disappear. I've Been High. It's a gorgeous wash of an album. I love Reveal. It's got its flaws. It is a little bit too samey, but I defy anybody not to stick this album on with the sun is shining outside in the middle of the summer and just let it wash over you. It's a great record, Reveal. At number 6, this was the album that really made me an R.E.M fan. So Out of Time came out. Everybody was buying it and listening to it. I dove back into the back catalogue with some of the IRS albums and that best of R.E.M. that I still own. And then my friend told me that you need to listen to the album before Out of Time, because that's their best. Green. So Green was given 5-star ratings by Q. I don't think it's quite that good. This was their first album for Warner. They had signed for Warner. People accused them of being a sellout, but they then dropped Green in 1988. Pop Song 89, Get Up, You Are the Everything, Stand, and World Leader Pretend would be a side of an album that anyone would be proud to release. That 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 punch of the record is... it's just phenomenal. They take a little bit of a down step, I think, with The Wrong Child. But then on side 2, you've got Orange Crush and Turn You Inside Out and Hair Shirt. And then I Remember California, and then lurking at the end of the record, Untitled. This album, it made me an R.E.M. fan. And whilst I've seen people really pick at its flaws, I enjoy it so much. Green at number 6. And at number 5, into my top 5. This was the most surprising revelation of listening to the album. I always knew I liked the opening track, and a couple of others later on. Accelerate. This was their penultimate album. This was the one they released after Around the Sun, when they knew that they'd kind of disappointed people and themselves, and thought, we can't go out on Around the Sun. We've got to do something else. And they did Accelerate. This is a banging record. This is full of energy and attack, of terrific songs, of the kind of singing that Michael Stipe wasn't doing in Reveal, much as I love it, and Around the Sun. It's almost an angry album, yet it doesn't at the same time feel that. So Living Well is the best revenge. I've already mentioned that. That's fantastic. Man-Sized Weed's great. Supernatural, super serious. Hollow Man. The title track, Accelerate's fantastic. Mr. Richards. Oh, that is just one of my favourite R.E.M. tracks. Sing for the Submarine is just fantastic. I've placed it in the top 5, which I know a lot of people say that none of their 3-piece records from their final phase deserve to be that high, but Accelerate's a terrific record. I did my re-rank of top 50 albums of the 2000s, and I'd actually got this and Reveal the other way round. It's the recent re-listenings that said, no, this is a better record than Reveal. Accelerate, my number 5. Number 4, I have placed what I think is a near perfect album. It's probably a 9 out of 10. From 1992, the album that caused them to be the biggest band on the planet after Out of Time had blown up. Automatic for the People. This sold bucket loads. And it was, you'd hear this coming out of every single dorm room when I went to university in 92. Drive was released as a single just before I went to Sheffield. And in one sense, it's a really downbeat album. There's a lot of reflections on mortality on here. Things like Try Not to Breathe. It's hard to describe how I feel about it, because its ubiquity causes it to drop down a bit. Tracks like New Orleans Instrumental number 1 are a bit pointless. Man on the Moon and Sidewinder Sleeps Tonight, I think, are hugely overplayed. But then, what can you say when you've got Night Swimming and Drive and Everybody Hurts and the closing track, Find the River? Now, Find the River, it's not. I don't think it's in my top 100 anymore. I'm not sure. But at one point, it was my 3rd favourite song of all time. And it's a really, really solid album, Automatic for the People. It's my number 4. At number 3, all 3 of these I do genuinely think are 10 out of 10 perfect records. But they get separated by the finest of margins. Number 3, Murmur, their debut from 1983. This would have been number 7 or 8 a couple of months ago, but this listening that I've gone through, I've come to appreciate the songs on Murmur way more than I used to. And I think part of the thing that caused it to be as low as it was a few months ago was the fact I'm not that fond of Radio Free Europe, which kicks the album off. So it doesn't get off to the greatest of starts for me. But then we get Pilgrimage and Laughing and Talk About the Passion, superb song, and Perfect Circle, Moral Kiosk, Sitting Still, and We Walk. That was the biggest surprise for me, hearing We Walk, and this is full of songs that will not leave my head. That when I see the title, I think of the chorus. It's full of invention and melody. It's the blueprint for the classic R.E.M. sound and their harmony vocals provided by Mike Mills beneath Michael Stipe's yelp. And it's really, really fine debut record. Murmur, my number 3. And number 2, I often used to cite this as my favourite R.E.M. album. The songs on this album are not as strong as Murmur, but their cohesion and how they hang together means that it is far greater than the sum of its parts. It's Life's Rich Pageant from 1986. Begin the Begin is just an absolutely barnstorming way to open the album. But throughout this album, you're getting stuff like Fall on Me, which is vocally brilliant, I believe, and Hyena, and Just a Touch, and What If We Give It Away, and Swan Swan Hummingbird, and Underneath the Bunker, that closes what I believe to be side 1, because again, I've never heard this on vinyl. And then there's Superman, sung by Mike Mills. The first time he was given a lead vocal, which they actually then went and released as a single. The Flowers of Guatemala. It's Cuyahoga. It's a terrific record, so much better than the sum of its parts. Life's Rich Pageant is a statement of what they were going to go on and do with the attack record of Document, Green, and then returning to with things like Monster and Accelerate. It's a banging record, Life's Rich Pageant. Which leaves Reckoning from 1984, their second album, as my number 1. This is, again, greater than the sum of its parts, but the parts on here, I think, are, songwriting-wise, every bit the equal of Murmur. And as a result, this is just a truly perfect record. There is nothing out of place on this. So let's run through Harbour Coat, Seven Chinese Brothers, So Central Rain, Pretty Persuasion, and Time After Time, Annalise. That's side 1. And again, a 5-track run, that's hard to beat. But then you flip onto side 2 for Second Guessing, Letter Never Sent, Camera, Don't Go Back to Rockville, which is just brilliant, and Little America. The song that I kind of know is Jefferson, I Think We're Lost. This is an absolutely wonderful record. I do think it's better than Murmur. It's my number 1. So that concludes my rundown of the 15 studio albums of R.E.M. There is no such thing as an R.E.M. album without at least one decent, if not great, track. And there are many R.E.M. albums with lots of great tracks. I'll be back with another video soon. Before I go, I'd remind you to subscribe if you haven't already done so, to click the thumbs up to like the video, the bell for notifications of future content, to share the video with other people. Let's grow the subscriber count, and thanks for watching.